The last time Germany and Russia clashed, it ended in flames, Berlin in ruins, Soviet tanks sealing a brutal defeat for the Third Reich, but that victory came at an unimaginable cost. Over 20 million Russian lives. History rarely repeats, but its echoes are undeniable. So what if these two powers met again today? Who would win, and what would victory look like? In this video, we'll examine a hypothetical situation where Germany and Russia go to war in the age of drones, cyber warfare, ubiquitous satellite surveillance, Orwellian propaganda machines, and hypersonic ballistic missiles that can carry tactical nuclear warheads thousands of miles in a matter of minutes. We'll look at how the two sides square up in terms of man and machine, and wargame how the conflict might play out. But first, we'll have to jump through a few hoops to create a scenario where Germany alone would find itself in a war with Russia alone in the first place. At the time of the making of this video, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is still in full swing. Germany has supported Ukraine with vast quantities of military, financial, and humanitarian aid, while imposing numerous sanctions and the diplomatic cold shoulder on Russia. And of course, Germany is a key member of NATO. And it's the NATO membership that creates the main conundrum for our scenario. In particular, it's NATO's so-called Article 5. Under Article 5, an attack on one member is an attack on all, compelling every NATO country, including the US, to defend the ally under attack. This means, for the sake of our scenario, a war between Russia and Germany would actually be a war between Russia and NATO. But that's not what we want to look at here. Fortunately, as is the case with so much legalese, the wording of Article 5 leaves us plenty of wiggle room to create a feasible scenario for Russia to fight Germany with the rest of NATO cleared out of the ring. Firstly, the text only covers an armed attack on a NATO member in Europe or North America. So, a Russian attack on German interests in, say, Asia or Africa could trigger a war between Russia and Germany without simultaneously triggering Article 5. The Bundeswehr, or German army, hasn't had any military bases outside Germany for decades, although its troops can be found periodically in other European NATO member states as part of NATO troop deployments in those countries. The only place outside Europe where any deployed German troops can be found is in Iraq. After completing operations against ISIS in conjunction with other allies in 2014, a contingent of German troops has remained in Iraq, ostensibly to train the Iraqi army. Russia has a large airbase in Syria, the spoils of its own intervention in the war against ISIS, and good relations with the Iraqi government and the main anti-ISIS militias there. So although a deliberate Russian airstrike on the German troops in Iraq is a plausible provocation between Russia and Germany, it's not very likely. Secondly, Article 5 only compels the signatories to take such action as it deems necessary, including the use of armed force, to restore and maintain the security of the North Atlantic area, in the case that one of them is attacked. So suppose Russia attacked Germany in a non-critical way, for example an attack on a factory in Germany that produces tanks or missiles, a strike not meant to cause major damage, but to demonstrate what can be done. NATO members could take action in the form of sanctions, diplomatic measures, and the kind of support Germany has provided to Ukraine, as opposed to the proverbial boots on the ground. They'd be choosing to put discretion before valor, so to speak. Suppose the US is not willing and able to join Germany in an all-out war with Russia. Maybe it'll already have its hands full in other entanglements in the Middle East or the South China Sea and can't afford the men or weapons for another major front. Maybe an all-out war against Russia over some far-off place isn't such an easy sell, so the political will to deal with soldiers coming home in body bags isn't what it used to be. And if the US is out, it's a sure bet that the smaller NATO members reliant on US military might for their defense will soon follow suit. Germany would have to declare war on Russia all by itself. However, the positions taken by some of the NATO members will prove critical to a German-Russian clash, as we shall soon see. The final loophole in Article 5 that might see Germany fighting Russia on its own is that while it's not explicitly stated in the text, the inference is that the Mutual Defense Pact is defensive. It only applies when a NATO member is attacked first, not when that member fires the first shot. If Germany attacked Russia first, or crossed one of the fabled Russian red lines without the consent or involvement of other NATO members, many or all of them could cite this reading of the clause to officially balk at joining the battle on Germany's side. For example, what if Ukraine attacked the Kremlin with a German-supplied long-range missile capable of holding a nuclear warhead, like the Taurus? According to Russia's updated nuclear doctrine, Germany would be liable for retaliatory actions, up to and including a nuclear response along with Ukraine. Suppose Russia's response was, say, to level the Reichstag building in Berlin, the seat of the German parliament. With an avant-garde hypersonic missile, it's likely the response of many less powerful NATO members would be to cast a loving gaze at their own magnificent parliament buildings, offer very loud condemnations and commiserations, and not much else. But let's assume the raising of the Reichstag has the effect of leaving Russia all on its own. The move leaves Chinese President Xi Jinping, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, the Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, and even Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko shaking their heads, tapping their foreheads with their forefingers at Putin, telling him, "You're on your own on this one." So Russia versus Germany is on. But how do they shape up as military powers? We'll give you a fair warning. If you're on Team Germany, you might want to look away about now. In almost every category, if you take NATO's substantial presence in Germany out of the equation, Russia's military means and power dwarf Germany's. True, much of Russia's equipment is Soviet-era and at least 30 years old, but the sheer scale of the difference in sizes of the respective forces is striking and should more than compensate for any golfing quality in Russia's favor. That said, as we've seen in Gaza, Lebanon, Yemen, and even Ukraine, a vast mismatch in power might equate to more destructive capability, but it isn't a guarantee of military success. Overall, Global Firepower's detailed comparison ranks Russia's military as second in the world, with Germany in 19th place. Russia has 1.3 million active military personnel, while Germany has just over 181,000. Russia then still has another 2 million personnel in reserve, and another 250,000 in paramilitary units, while Germany has 34,000 reservists and no paramilitary units at all. In terms of land-based power to support these troops on the ground, Russia also has an overwhelming advantage. We're talking 40 times as many tanks, 10,344 versus 236, even if most of the Russian tanks are Soviet-era T-72 variants, and all the German tanks are high-end Leopard 2A5s, 2A6s, and 2A7s. The Russians also have an 8-fold advantage in armored fighting vehicles, roughly 24,000 versus 3,000. 45 times more pieces of artillery, roughly 18,000 versus 300. 60 times more self-propelled artillery, roughly 6,300 versus 135. And 130 times more rocket artillery, over 3,065 pieces against just 33. Suffice it to say, of the two, it's not Germany that's likely to consider a land invasion with waves of troops and hardware, but a limited strategic land grab, similar to Ukraine's Kursk incursion in mid-2024. That might be possible and crucial, as we shall see. Of course, in modern warfare, you can have as much manpower as you like, but you're a sitting duck if you can't control the air. Unfortunately, from the German perspective, when it comes to air power, Russia again has a large advantage, albeit nowhere near as pronounced as the mismatch in land and manpower. Russia has almost 7 times as many military aircraft as Germany, around 4,400 as opposed to 618. Germany has around 76 attack aircraft, including 133 Eurofighter Typhoon fighters. By comparison, Russia's fleet of around 730 attack aircraft, multi-role planes, and bombers includes Sukhoi Su-34s, Su-35s, Su-24s, and Su-25s, and the Tupolev Tu-22M, Tu-95, and Tu-160. Russia also has almost 6 times as many attack helicopters. Russia also has a strong advantage in other critical aspects of air-based modern warfare: drones and UAVs. Although it's difficult to get a sense of how many military UAVs each side has, Germany's focus has been on developing UAVs for reconnaissance rather than offensive purposes. Russia, on the other hand, has several years of experience learning drone warfare the hard way, in blood on the battlefield. Ukraine's drone capabilities are fearsome, and Russia has to adapt fast to try and keep up. Russia's UAV arsenal includes high-end combat UAVs like the Sukhoi S-70 Okhotnik stealth drone, capable of carrying 3 tons of armaments for 3,700 miles at up to 600 miles per hour, and the Orion, Sirius, and Grom long-range attack drones. But Russia also has factories churning out cheap kamikaze Lancet-Garin loitering munitions, nicknamed the Flying Lawnmower, which have been invaluable in carrying out medium-range bombing raids, or just to distract air defenses so that more expensive missiles used in the same attack have a greater chance of reaching their mark. And to combat Ukraine's prolific and innovative use of drones on the battlefield and to launch long-range strikes, Russia has been forced to innovate. Russia's electronic warfare has improved significantly, and it's pioneered innovations like AI-powered evasive movement modules on UAVs, and even UAVs attached to fiber optic cables rather than guided by GPS to counter Ukraine's own highly capable electronic anti-drone warfare. Any hopes for victory at sea look like a lost cause too. In and on the water, Russia holds a more or less 10-fold advantage in terms of the number of vessels, 781 or so to 64. Crucially though, Russia has 65 submarines, compared to Germany's 6, most of which are nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines capable of firing nuclear weapons. Russia reportedly has the ominous-looking Poseidon nuclear-powered, long-distance guided unmanned torpedo vehicle in the water, capable of moving in high stealth for extended periods and carrying a 100-kiloton nuclear warhead. Exploding just one of these off the coast of Germany could submerge large swathes of the country in radioactive water. Russia also has huge superiority when it comes to missiles and defenses against them. Germany's primary missile is the air-launched Taurus KEPD-350 cruise missile, of which it has around 600. It can carry a 1,060-pound warhead, enough to cause serious damage, but only has a range of around 300 miles, which is nowhere near enough for it to hit Russia from Germany. Their low-cost Joint Fire Support Missile, or JFS-M, cruise missile also has a range of around 300 miles. Germany has significantly more surface or air-launched IRIS-T infrared homing missiles, also known as the AIM-2000. But these short-range missiles are meant primarily for air defense, to be primarily used with the IRIS-T battery system. They only carry a 25-pound warhead and have a range between 7 and 60 miles. They're great for defense against incoming arrivals, but not that effective against bigger targets. Germany also has the MEADS, or Medium Extended Air Defense System, which fires the PAC-3 MSE missile. Germany has at least 9 systems with 72 launches of this missile, which can be used with the Patriot air defense system and are effective against both aircraft and missiles. These systems may be enough to thwart Russian missile attacks, but for how long? By comparison, Russia's missile arsenal is intimidating, particularly its nuclear missile inventory, which is regarded as the largest and most diverse in the world. The Kh-47M2 Kinzhal nuclear-capable air-launched ballistic missile has proven effective in Ukraine. With a range of over 1,200 miles at hypersonic speeds, it's proven extremely difficult to intercept or shoot down. The sea-launched Caliber and ground-launched Kh-55 and Kh-555 also have ranges of 1,000 to 2,000 miles. All of these can carry conventional warheads of hundreds of pounds. Russia's Iskander-M ground-launched semi-ballistic missiles have also been used to devastating effect in Ukraine, with a warhead of up to 1,500 pounds, but a range of only up to 300 miles. On the other hand, the submarine-launched R-29R and R-39 have a range of around 4,500 miles. Then there is the air-launched FAB family of gliding bombs, which can carry warheads of up to 6,000 pounds. These Soviet-era gravity bombs have been equipped with modules for guided flight and pop-out wings, giving them the ability to cause devastating strikes at a range of up to 45 miles, and Russia has thousands of them. Lest we forget, Russia also has nuclear-capable ICBMs, or intercontinental ballistic missiles. In fact, they have approximately 326 such missiles, capable of carrying over 900 nuclear warheads and hitting the US across the Atlantic or Pacific Oceans. These include the ground-launched RS-28 Sarmat, RT-2UTTH Topol-M, RS-24 Yars, and older UR-100N, and submarine-launched RSM-54, R-29RMU Sineva, RSM-56, R-30 Bulava, and older RSM-40, R-29 Vysota. There's also the small matter of the Avangard hypersonic glide vehicle, which can be launched from the UR-100 UTT-KH, R-36M2, and RS-28 ICBMs. With a cruising speed of Mach 27, or 20,000 miles per hour, it's believed to be impossible to shoot down by any current air defense system. It can carry a nuclear payload with a 2-megaton blast yield and a range of ferocious conventional warheads. Looking at all that, you'd be forgiven for considering a German attack on Russia to be somewhat suicidal, particularly without NATO, and especially the US in its corner. But let's assume that Russia has no appetite for waging a nuclear war in the heart of Europe. Perhaps the US has made it clear that it won't get involved in a conventional war between Russia and Germany, particularly one that's been provoked by Germany. Let's assume Russia weighs up the balance of power and decides that it can remove the German threat by conventional means without the use of nukes. So how might the war play out with all this in mind? The crucial factor is that Russia and Germany do not share a border, complicating the possibility of a land-based invasion in either direction significantly. The position of the only country that shares a border with both, Poland, will be critical to how events unfold. If Poland takes a belligerently neutral stance, namely aggressively refusing both sides access to its territory and airspace for attacks, Russia is likely to start the war by softening up the Germans with long-range cruise and ballistic missile strikes from Russian territory, or perhaps from the Baltic or Black Seas. These attacks would likely target the German army, naval and air bases, air defense systems, military command centers, military industrial facilities such as weapons manufacturing plants, and critical infrastructure like power plants. Germany would be limited in its ability to respond, perhaps only being able to launch missiles at equivalent Russian targets from the Black Sea. But that would happen only if Turkey broke the Montreal Convention and allowed access to German warships or bombers through the Bosporus Straits in the first place. However, given the political, economic, and even military countermeasures from a large group of powerful nations that would inevitably follow such a move by the Turks, it's unlikely they'll allow either the Germans or Russians to pass through the straits for the purpose of waging war. With major blows to its military capability being inflicted by weeks of long-range missile strikes, assuming the Germans still had an appetite for battle, there are a few things they could do to strike back. But that appetite is by no means a given. Although, as we've seen in Ukraine, the invasion of one's homeland is a sure way to galvanize nationalistic fervor in its defense, Germany is a very different prospect to Ukraine. For one thing, Ukraine had the benefit of up to a decade of preparing for war, building up an army of up to 1 million troops, and more importantly, an extensive range of fortifications, minefields, and defensive structures across a front line of over 1,000 miles. Germany has nothing of the sort. Also, while the majority of the Ukrainian people supported resisting Russian aggression and going to war, it's unclear whether the German population would react in the same way, especially with missiles raining down and the need to constantly scamper to air raid shelters. Around 20% of the German population is not ethnically German. A substantial percentage of those have only been in Germany for a generation or two, and it's unclear how many of them will be willing to give up their lives for their adopted country. In 2024, up to a third of the population on both the far left and far right sides of the German political spectrum have already voiced resistance to German military support in Ukraine, let alone Germany going to war itself. But let's assume an attack on the motherland is enough to muster an upswell of the spirit of resistance, and the German government has the buy-in of enough people to strike back. If not to secure victory, then to secure better terms in the inevitable peace negotiations down the line. What could Germany do? One option might be sabotage. German agents inside Russia could start blowing up military and other key infrastructure. Ukraine has had some success in persuading disgruntled Russians to attack Russia from within with car bombs and other forms of terrorism, and with locally launched drone attacks. With much deeper pockets than Ukraine, Germany might be able to attract enough saboteurs to cause major disruptions and distractions for Russia, on top of the material damage they inflict. Germany could also attack critical Russian infrastructure outside of Russia itself, such as undersea internet cables, the remains of the Nord Stream pipelines, or the gas pipelines running through Ukraine and Turkey to Europe and beyond. Of course, this strategy works both ways. Russia might have just as much success luring Germans to perform similar acts of sabotage, and blowing up Russian gas lines on which NATO allies like Hungary and Slovakia depend isn't likely to win Germany too many brownie points in its attempts to rouse support from those nations. These are high-risk strategies, where it's highly dubious the means will justify the ends. Another way that Germany could hurt Russia is with cyber warfare. Germany could attack Russia's digital infrastructure, such as government resources, the Russian financial system, and of course, both military and civilian communications networks. Again, the Russians are more notorious for their cyber warfare exploits than the Germans and have hardened their digital defenses as a result of the Ukraine war. But this strategy may well backfire badly for Germany. A gambit with a greater chance of success might be for Germany to try and seize the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad, particularly if the aim was to gain some leverage at peace settlement talks. Kaliningrad sits some 400 miles away from mainland Russia, on the Baltic coast between Lithuania and Poland, housing a population of around 500,000. The city was German, named Königsberg, until after the Second World War, after which the German population was more or less ethnically cleansed and replaced first with Lithuanians, then Russians. As Russia's bridgehead into Western Europe and only ice-free Baltic port, it's a critical location for Russia, housing its Baltic naval fleet, fighter jets, Iskander-M missiles, and significant air defenses, including S-300 and S-400 systems and artillery. Germany could try a blitzkrieg invasion of Kaliningrad in an attempt to overpower the Russian military, seize control, then negotiate with Russia on the basis of, "You stop bombing us, and we'll give Kaliningrad back." Would such an attack work? It's hard to say. An unexpected lightning-quick attack with naval, air, and sea-based missiles could incapacitate much of the Baltic fleet, take out their air defenses, and create the opportunity for ground troops to land. This could be either by means of paratroopers or troops landed from transport ships. It's unlikely Russia would be willing to bomb the city to smithereens to unseat the German forces or invade Poland and/or Lithuania in order to reach it by land. That would mean having to attempt to take it back by naval assault, followed by an attempted landing of troops via naval transport ships. This strategy could be compromised by other nations like Norway and Sweden, blocking access to the Russian fleet from the Baltic Sea. So if, and that's a big if, Germany could seize Kaliningrad, it would likely be its biggest trump card in bringing an end to the war on acceptable terms for Germany. All other outcomes for Germany look pretty bleak. But does that mean Russia wins? Does Germany win, or is it a tie? That depends very much on the goals of the war for both sides. It's hard to foresee a situation where either Russia or Germany would have the goal of capturing or annexing each other's territory. There may be economic benefits, particularly for Germany, if they were to capture Russian energy resources. However, strategically, given the vast distances between the two nations, any foothold so far from home is likely to be more of a viper's nest than a gain in the longer term. So if Russia managed to hobble or entirely disable Germany's ability to pose a long-term military threat, then it might well consider that a victory. If Germany still retained the capacity to hurt Russia, the Russians might well consider the whole episode a colossal waste of time, money, and human life. For Germany, an end to the war involving security guarantees from Russia or other nations like the US that prevent the possibility of future Russian aggression could definitely be seen as a victory, notwithstanding the terrible costs of the damage inflicted. All things considered, Germany is likely to suffer a magnitude of destruction greater than Russia's in the event of an all-out war between the two. But if Germany is still standing at the end of it, and Russia's military capacity has been substantially weakened as a result of the conflict, from the neutral perspective, it would probably be fair to call it a tie. After all, both Germany and Russia have recovered from worse in the past. But what do you think? How would this war play out? Who would win? And what might victory look like? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching.